with an addendum. Addendum is we have a motion to approve two settlements from, two agreements that we referenced, we will talk about later, from Mrs. Beatman Buckman. So with that, sir, can I have a motion? Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Excuse me. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? I'm going to apologize if I burnt a little bit tonight, folks. Coca-Cola seems to be doing it to me lately. So I apologize ahead of time. Okay, a motion to approve the minutes. Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? At this point in time, we will have a presentation. TIF update from Alicia Carner, Northampton County Department of Community and Economic Development. I did say your name correctly?
Alicia Carner, yes. And I'm before you tonight as the Executive Director of the Northampton County Industrial Development Authority. Jamie Whalen is also with the authority. She's distributing some information that pretty much summarizes the packets that everyone should have received except for potentially the new board member several weeks ago.
Okay.
Some of you may recall, I was before you a year ago when I asked that you appoint a member of the school board to our TIF committee. And at that time, Carrie Leonard Ellison was appointed, and she's done an excellent job with the committee, making sure the concerns of the Easton School District have been brought to the table. And so I want to thank her for her participation in the process. As you may know, the Northampton County Industrial Development Authority's role in the county is to primarily do tax-exempt financing for manufacturers. And the state statute for TIFs does allow us to also be the administrator of any kind of TIF that is created within the county. And we currently have an existing relationship with the Easton Area School District for the Palmer Town Center TIF. It is a very successful TIF. It allowed us to remove blight in Palmer Township. We increased the tax base, and we're on target to repay that TIF debt as originally projected. Most of you know where the proposed location of the Route 33 interchange TIF is located. It's in the northern sections of Palmer Township. We have brought a map with us. Roger, if you'll bring that forward. It is located along Route 33 at 33 and Main Street. What we would,
Right there.
yeah, wherever they would prefer.
Right here by where you were standing would probably be the best, where you're sitting, probably the best spot. Can all the board members see that? Mrs. Hess, you all right? Bob, you okay?
To orient you, you'll see in the middle the Route 33 corridor running north and south.
Is that the green?
Yeah.
Okay.
The red outline is the proposed TIF district. The green is the new interchange and the public improvements. And so what we're proposing we do is capture the tax dollars that will be generated within the district to build the public assets, which include the interchange and the bridge replacement over Route 33. That bridge is currently considered structurally deficient, and unfortunately PennDOT does not have the funds to replace it. So like so many of our bridges, it's in jeopardy of being shut down.
I'm not surprised by that. No.
What I'm going to do is discuss a little bit of the TIF process and what the economic development impact is on the county. There are several other people here with the TIF team who have been participating all along the process who will speak to other aspects of it. But to start, the TIF process is clearly outlined in the state statute. And the first step is to have the appointees from the various taxing bodies within the proposed area participating within a committee structure. And so, as I had said previously, you'd done that last summer. At the same time, we brought on a TIF consultant, which is required. We had a market and feasibility study done of the district, which is also required. And we developed the TIF plan, which is the black binder that you were presented with earlier. Last month, we presented to Palmer Township the same plan, and they opted in. They had a unanimous vote to support the TIF. So we're here before the Easton School District tonight in hopes of gaining your support. And then the next step would be a public hearing, of which we have already advertised and presented the information to both the school district and the township, and that would be held in front of the Northampton County Finance Committee and Economic Development Committees. and then the county would vote to create the TIF in October is what we're currently looking at. This is a very important economic development project for Northampton County. It is 600 plus acres of prime property, which is geared towards industrial, commercial, retail, and distribution space. We currently are losing prospects to other counties, to other regions of the state, because we don't necessarily have what they're looking for with the available sewer and water in other locations, and that's what we will gain with this site. Office space tends to go to the 78 corridor in Lehigh County. The Poconos are a magnet for some other kinds of businesses, and these are things that we feel that, in Northampton County, we get the residents that come in, and then the businesses are, further west. And we are the first stop from New Jersey, which is where so many of our businesses come from. So this is an important economic development project for Northampton County that will make us more competitive for those businesses that are looking at the Lehigh Valley. At this time, I'd like to introduce Dave Culver. He's a Palmer Township supervisor. What he will do is discuss Palmer Township's role in the process.
Okay, thank you. As Alicia said, my name is Dave Culver. I'm the chairman of the Board of Supervisors in Palmer Township. I want to thank you for having us here this evening, and I want to talk about some of the concerns that Palmer had before we approved this and some of the concerns that are out there in the public. First and foremost, everybody has issues with money and budget. It's not going away anytime soon. We all have it. We've been living it. And we're taking a very proactive approach at the development of the north end of Palmer Township. There's somewhat of about 1,000 acres up there, 680 acres in the TIF project, and Palmer Township's comprehensive plan has for over 20 years said that there will be little to no development on the change of agricultural land without the infrastructure and road network to put that in. The interchange provides that. We have said repetitively that we would not look at rezoning that land without an interchange going in because there's just no possible way we could handle the road network. So that was one of our big concerns. How can we do an economic project on the north end, do it right, protect everybody? This zoning changes. We're in the process of looking at a number of different districts up there, anything from retail right around, almost what someone would figure coming right off of, and then what you'd expect to see off of an interchange with gas and stores and a hotel, that type of thing, and then blossom back into manufacturing, light industrial, and some office space. The township does not want to see and will not rezone any of this land for residential use. There's been a lot of question out there about the potential of homes up there, adding a big burden to the school district. We're talking about 800-900 acres in Palmer Township. The developer has vowed no residential development. The township does not want to see, and the developer has vowed no big boxes. We're not going to see 1 million, 2 million square feet like you've seen out on 22, or I'm sorry, 78. What's being developed in that area now, many of you are familiar with, like a Majestic, Porsche, professional type office, light manufacturing. There is a component of manufacturing there. It's not 500,000 or 1 million square feet under a roof where 10 people are working on a dock and we're seeing truck traffic around the clock. That's not what's ever going to go there. The need for the interchange is obvious. The infrastructure is there. Water, the ability for sewer, the Nazareth Authority sewer plant, or potentially the Palmer Interceptor just south of the site, and electric. All the infrastructure is there for that. We bought into this project a number of years back, the concept of the interchange, and doing that, the concern was how it was going to be funded. As this TIF project came along and I became the representative from Palmer, we had many of the same concerns that you folks will have and probably do have. We're all involved in this TIF together on 25th Street. If it failed, the 3 taxing bodies are responsible: the county, the school district, and Palmer Township. This is a unique case that I've never been involved with or heard of before, where the project falls back on the landowner in a neighborhood improvement district. If the project fails, when these folks brought it to us, I said, I want to see in big capital, bold letters that there is no way the township, the school district, or the county can ever be responsible for paying any of these funds associated with this bond. When they brought it to us, it came in big black capital bold letters saying exactly that we are not going to burden Palmer Township or any of the other two taxing bodies be responsible for that. If the project does not go, it gives an incentive, gives a big incentive for the developer to sell land and develop. Because if they don't, it falls back on them to make the bond payment. If for some reason the developer defaults, it's going to fall back on the bondholders. So that was a big key to us in the township, and one that we were able to hear. So in closing, as you heard from Alicia, this was before my board a couple of weeks back. We voted unanimously to approve it. We think it's a good thing for the region. We think it's a good thing for the county. We think it's a great thing for Palmer Township and the surrounding municipalities. And I hope that you folks see the merits in this project and the long-term gain. This is not a short-term thing. No money coming off of this in the first 5 years. We're all getting what we're getting right now for the length of the 20 years. They'll go into detail on that, but money doesn't start to kick in until year 6, and at the end of the TIF is where it really kicks in. So with that being said, I hope you see the merits in the project, and that we're hoping that you will take action on this evening. Thank you.
Joe Hogan is our TIF consultant. Just as an aside, he is the TIF consultant that helped with the Palmer Town Center project, which has been so successful. So he was engaged to put together the plan or help the committee with the plan for this project as well.
Thank you. Again, the name is Joe Hogan. I'm with the firm of Mullen Lonergan. You have this great big TIF plan. It was put together with a lot of other people involved. City, the bond underwriters prepared the financing projections. The Dietrich Group did the appraisal reports. So there's a lot of information. And what we try to do is in your informational packet on the left-hand side is a 2-page summary. And I thought the best way to try to explain the TIF with you is take those important points and talk about them and try to explain them. But before we get into that, I think there's one difference in tax increment financing that we should look at and understand. I'm sure you've heard about the KOZs and LRTAs. And they're programs where you give up the taxes up front and you really don't know where the economic benefits go to. It goes somewhere into that developer's hands out there. With tax increment financing, the plan sets aside specifically what the monies will be used for and how they'll be controlled, and they're controlled by a public body, the Industrial Development Authority. So this is a very upfront, deliberate distinction of how the funds are used. Again, with LRTA and KOZ, you don't know where the benefit went and how it's really needed and justified. I think we do that with tax increment financing. So let's take a look at that 2-page summary. Again, the project consists of 689 acres. We have a 5-acre residential parcel that will not be affected. We have about 7 acres of a railroad right-of-way. And then there's the 50-acre parcel owned by the Nazareth Municipal Authority. And the remaining lands are owned by the TIF applicant. Our next main heading is the current assessment and taxes, and this is important. Right now, the assessed value of all the properties in the TIF district are $2,230,300. That amount is frozen. So whatever your millage rates are, you will collect that tax before any other tax is shared to finance the TIF district. That's a priority distribution. As your millage rates go up, that millage rate will be applied to that tax increment base. So presently, you're receiving about $116,382 per year under this tax increment plan. That's the priority distribution. And that assumes that the 2% discount. When you divide the acreage, it means that the school district is getting about $168.80 per acre on this large tract of land. So it's really not generating a significant amount of money to a valuable piece of land that has railroad right-of-way located on Route 33 but no interchange. Now, how do we come up with the development of the TIF district? The feasibility study by the Dietrich Group, which was very detailed, projected 4 different types of non-residential use and said it would take about 12 years for this project to be built out and developed. And if we allow time for the build out and then the assessment and the collection of taxes, it takes us almost 14 years for this project to be fully completed. So we should look at this as a full-time, long-range project that's for the future. It's to bring more jobs into the area. The Dietrich Group forecast over 3,600 jobs over that 14-year build-out period. So it's a significant economic engine and certainly seems to be something appropriate given the economy that we have at the local level and the national level. The amount of bonds, the TIF plan sets up a maximum amount of bond authorization for the Industrial Development Authority. They would borrow $33,248,000. That's the maximum they will have. On the next section, it says, what are we going to do with that money if we can borrow it? $22,333,000 would be allocated towards the construction of the interchange and some of the transitional costs that we will be required to do, like traffic signals right across Main Street. It's a major traffic improvement that has to be done to meet PennDOT standards. However, the total cost of that interchange estimated by the engineers is $23,452,000. So not all the money can be funded from tax increment financing. That means that the burden for the rest of the funding comes from the TIF applicant. He will have to put up over $1.1 million to make the project a reality. And of course, if the project comes in higher than our estimate, we can increase the TIF. That also falls on the shoulders of the TIF applicant. Because this is a long-range project, the city underwriters have told us that you have to really establish that not much is going to happen for the first 3 years, 5 years. So we have set aside out of the bond what we call capitalized interest. That means that the bank trustee will hold, and you can see that number, $6,561,000. They will hold that to pay the interest on the bonds for the first 3 years. In addition, there is a debt reserve fund of $3,224,000. Why are all these things being budgeted by Citibank? Number one, the bonds have no full faith and credit of any municipality. As the chairman of the township said, you have no exposure or liability for this project. You're not pledging anything. If the project fails, it doesn't come out of any of the taxing body's pockets. But because of that, because these are what we call non-rated bonds, the city says that you have to have a lot of backup, the debt reserve fund, the capitalized interest. And they've also told us that these bonds, even though they're tax-exempt bonds, will command a premium as far as interest rates. And they're projecting that the interest rate on the bonds would probably come in around 7%. So all these items affected how we structured the TIF debt. How the $23 million comes up to $33 million is mainly due to the capitalized interest and the debt reserve fund. In our next section, we talk about how do we allocate the tax increment funds, those additional taxes that pay the TIF debt. Again, during the first 3 years of the project, we don't anticipate any new development coming online. And in years 4 and 5, the amount coming online is really not sufficient to help pay a substantial amount of principal. So we're really saying to the public bodies, we need 100% of anything that comes online as an added tax for the first 5 years. And then from years 6 through 20, 80% would go to the tax increment financing, and 20% goes to the 3 taxing bodies to be shared proportionate to your share of the millage rates. At the next section, the TIF Act requires us to look at the economic impact of a project on the taxing bodies. The first number is the $2,237,327. That represents your 20 years of tax increment based $116,000, assuming no increase in millage rates. That's the priority distribution you must get first before there's any sharing of the TIF debt. The 20% share of the tax increment over 20 years would amount in our projections to $17,414,000. So from years 6 on through 20, we estimate there'd be about $17 million coming to the school district as your share of the tax increment. And as you well know, the earned income tax and the transfer tax are shared equally with the township. Going back to the study by the Dietrich Group, they are projecting 3,628 jobs, and they classify them by retail and office and labor. We went to the 2009 census, and we saw that male workers in Palmer Township earned $57,000, and female workers earned $40,000. So we averaged that out to $48,600 and multiplied it by the 1%, and that's how we came up with our number of the earned income tax for 10% of the employees. And when I looked at the Dietrich report, they're saying it would take about 7 years to generate 168 jobs in the 10% portfolio for the township. So they're not all coming at the same time. Just like it's taking 14 years to build out, it's going to take that many years to build up the number of employees and new employees coming in. But we did pick that up. And then the share of the real estate transfer tax. We took the $414 million and times it by the 1% transfer tax. And we assumed that none of those properties would be transferred a second time during the life of the TIF. Finally, I want to also mention to you that the TIF plan has a maximum term of 20 years. But you're going to see in the resolution before you tonight that it says that the TIF district will expire the sooner of 20 years or retirement of the bonds. And because those bonds are what we call story bonds, non-rated bonds, city's saying we need a lot of that cash flow to make sure we can meet the debt service because there is no full faith and credit. There is no publicly traded corporation as a developer. So someone buying the bonds out in California doesn't know who the developer is, doesn't know anything about the project. So we have to make sure we have adequate debt coverage ratio. But beyond that, we're also going to overlay this TIF district, what we call a neighborhood improvement district. A neighborhood improvement district will put a special levy, and it's only done by the township. The township will adopt the neighborhood improvement district. And basically what that will say, in any year in which there is insufficient debt service to pay the tax increment bonds, that neighborhood improvement district will require a levy to be paid to pay the bonds. So how do we pay the bonds? We have the tax increment that comes from the tax increment financing plan. And then we have the neighborhood improvement district backing it up if things don't work out. And then, as the chairman said to you, if that doesn't work, it's the bondholders who take the risk and the hit. That's why they command that premium interest rate, and that's why the rates are so high in doing it. Again, if you look at the city projections in the TIF plan, they show that the project could possibly be paid off in 14 or 15 years if the build-out proceeds according to the Dietrich report. And we're hoping to equal it and make it work. There's an incentive for the developer applicant to make it work, to sell the properties quickly. Otherwise, he's going to have to pay through the neighborhood improvement district. And I think I covered the unused revenues in that one section. That any unused revenues go into a sinking fund. We'll use that to pay off the bonds or hold them to pay the bonds to maturity. And if we can pay the bonds off sooner than 20 years, then 100% of the taxes will flow to you. So we're hoping that you can look at this as a long-range plan to create jobs and economic development in the township. One more item to talk about is the interchange is not built by the developer. It's going to be built with state prevailing wage rates. It's going to be publicly bid. It's going to be controlled by the Industrial Development Authority. They're the banker. They're going to have the funds. The monies never go into the hands of a developer. It's all used for public improvements. And then when the project is done, we're going to turn it over to PennDOT, and it's theirs to maintain and control forever. So we're putting a limit on how much you're going to borrow, and we're doing it in such a fashion that city thinks this is the only way to finance the TIF debt, and that is with the capitalized interest, the debt reserve fund, and a high debt coverage ratio. So that summarizes it. There's a few more things that are important. One of the issues we discussed when we had a meeting with your solicitor, Mr. Freund, is that the idea that what happens if somebody tries to appeal assessments. We have with us tonight Peter Carlucci of Eckert Siemens, and he's going to explain the type of agreement we're going to have to prevent or control developers of parcels from appealing their assessments and some other major aspects of the TIF project. Peter? Do you want to hold the questions till Peter's done, and we'll try to answer that?
Thank you. Again, my name's Peter Carlucci. I'm an attorney with the firm of Eckert Siemens, Chernin Malott. One of the issues that, or questions that had been raised was whether the owners of the real estate, after the improvements have been constructed, would be able to challenge the assessed valuation of the property. Of course, the security for the repayment of the bonds is the incremental tax revenues that will be derived. So in order to protect the bondholders, there will be an affirmative agreement entered into, binding upon all the property owners to the effect that they will not be able to challenge the assessed value of their property so long as the TIF bonds remain outstanding. And that will be incorporated as part of the documentation for the financing. I've given Mr. Spry a sample of the provision. He's familiar with these types of provisions, and they will be, I'm sure, reviewing documents to be satisfied that the covenant has been included. So that's one issue that I wanted to put to bed. There had also been, I think, a suggestion that there may be some employment opportunities available as a result of the development that will occur on these properties. And as you heard earlier, it's going to be a mixed development. I think on the fringes there may be some warehousing. There will certainly be some retail, office, small manufacturing facilities. I think there's also, the developer has a keen interest in pursuing the bioscience industries as well. So these will be, I think, many professional jobs become available. I think the wage structure will certainly be very favorable. Question had been raised, I think, as to whether there would be any opportunity for perhaps graduates of the school district or others that are part of the Career Institute program. I think that Mr. Schrin, given his participation in the community and support, would certainly be very pleased to entertain the opportunity to work with the school district in that regard. And I wanted to deliver that message to you as well. In order for the school board to move forward, assuming you're prepared to do that, it would require the approval of a resolution. I don't believe a resolution was included in your meeting packets for this evening, but I have copies here that I'd like to just sort of distribute and just review it in summary form, if I may. The first rule is that no one's allowed to fall asleep.
I'm not promising anything.
Okay. Let me just take you right to page 2. The first page contains a lot of recitals that are intended to give background with respect to the action that will be asked of the school board and to identify certain terms. But let's look at paragraph or section number 2 first of all. There are certain conditions that are identified that are conditions pursuant to which the school district would be willing to participate. One, of course, is that the district be created. Secondly, that all the requirements with respect to the statute that govern TIF financings be satisfied. That there would be a formation of the neighborhood improvement district. And you recall from Joe's presentation that the neighborhood improvement district, often referred to in its acronym as a NID, is a mechanism by which special assessments can be levied on those properties only within the TIF district as necessary in order to generate monies sufficient to retire the debt, the TIF debt. Finally, there would be a cooperation agreement that would be entered into by the three taxing bodies as well as the IDA, and it would set forth a number of different things. Among those would be the covenant that I talked about earlier as an example, that the property owners would not be permitted to challenge the assessed valuation of their properties for so long as the TIF debt remains outstanding. The resolution authorizes the participation with 100% of the tax increment revenues, if any are generated, within the first 5 years, to be applied to the payment of the TIF debt. And after that, the split is 80% to the TIF debt and 20% of the incremental tax revenues would go to the school district, county, and township. Keep in mind that this does not affect in any way the taxes that are currently being generated from this property. Those revenues, tax revenues, will always be payable to the school district, the township, and the county. The resolution authorizes the appropriate officials of the school district to negotiate and enter into the cooperation agreement. And it authorizes, once the resolution has been approved, and I don't mean to be presumptuous, but we're hoping, of course, for approval. Once it's been approved, it authorizes the secretary of the board to convey signed copies to the other taxing bodies, and specifically the county. And finally, let's look at Section 5, which makes it very clear that the school district's election to participate in this tax increment to financing the project plan does not in any way obligate it or pledge any of your tax revenues or your full faith or credit of the school district. In short, there would be, again, no financial responsibility undertaken by the school district with respect to the payment of the outstanding tax increment financing debt. All that risk falls on the bondholders. In the event that the incremental tax revenues are not sufficient, in the event that the special assessment revenues imposed through the NID are insufficient, it's the bondholders that take the risk. That does not fall on anyone else. So that's a brief summary, I think, and a good explanation, if I may say so myself, of the resolution, since I drafted it, for your consideration. Mr. President, I think we'd be happy to respond to any questions or concerns that members of the board may have.
At this time, any board member have any questions?
Just on the, I guess, the last point that you made, you talked about the neighborhood improvement district.
Yes, sir.
And I thought I heard at the Palmer discussion that the developer would put a letter of credit in place. Was that, or did I mistakenly hear that, or I was hearing things, or was that?
You may have been hearing things
Okay.
from that.
So
I
then
think,
on the neighborhood improvement
yes,
district,
yeah.
So that would be an additional assessment on all landowners.
Within the district only,
Within the
though.
district.
Within the TIF district, not school district, TIF
So that
district.
would include Porsche, for instance, that's there now.
They're outside of the TIF
Oh, they are?
district, yes.
Okay. Well, can you help me out with the boundary again,
Yeah.
please?
All vacant.
All vacant land, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
But so anything surrounding Porsche, so,
Right, if it's
Okay.
vacant, yes.
okay.
And we may want to point out where
And that was one of the questions I had, that
Yeah.
Porsche, so
Yeah,
Porsche's taxes are included in, they're outside the
They're
district,
outside
so,
the
It is
okay,
outside the district.
okay,
That's an existing building, we didn't want to touch it.
makes sense. Okay.
Any board members got any questions?
Yeah, one over here. yeah.
Where is the current real estate tax revenue being generated? And can you imagine any circumstance in the development that would jeopardize that current tax revenue?
The current tax revenue is being generated from the current use of the property. And right now, it's zoned agricultural, I believe, David? Yep. And so the tax revenues that are being derived are basically on agricultural land. So I don't foresee any basis upon which that can be interrupted.
And there's a table A in your plan that gives the parcels and their assessed value.
No, that's
That's
right.
Laura's reading.
That's,
Maybe tonight.
maybe tonight. So,
Any other board members?
I have a question. I guess it's more so as we're looking at this and we put the interchange in, there are only, can you hear me?
I'm listening.
Okay. I speak just as loud as you do, Carrie.
Well, I don't know about that. If you do, you're trouble.
Yeah. I guess my concern is looking at the entrances and the roadways that come in, and I'm worried about congestion, because when I think about 25th Street 10, 15, 20 years ago, and I look at it now at 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock, or in the morning, there's a lot of congestion, so I have a concern with the surrounding areas.
I think we're fortunate to have the engineers that did the design and the studies, Anne Marie Vigilante.
Sure, I can address that. Throughout this whole process, we've been working with PennDOT, there's not only a point of access study, which actually, is a study required by PennDOT to even see if an interchange is feasible in application. And that kind of takes you, it looks at the interchanges north and south of you, and your intersections to the east and west, and see what kind of impact an interchange would have on those intersections. Basically, it would redistribute all the traffic that projected in 20 years from now would have. That's the first part of the whole process. So we went through the point of access study, we studied those intersections, we redistributed the traffic as, obviously, trucks are gonna use this interchange like closer to it and into the north and south. After that, we were required to do a traffic impact study, which basically we have to study 20 of the intersections in the surrounding area and determine 20 years from now, when this thing is completely built out, how those intersections and this interchange will work. The interchange is designed, or is being designed, to accommodate a 20-year build-out. So 20 years in terms of everything being developed, what type of interchange we need to be in place to accommodate that. That's the first part of it. What we're also being required to look at is, as the development comes online, what type of improvements at other intersections are going to be necessary. By the end of, I guess, the end of this month, we'll be submitting back to PennDOT to basically review that information, show them what's going to happen at those intersections, and kind of come up with conceptual ideas that as developers come online for each of those parcels, what would need to be done. But the interchange will be the first step, and that is going to be designed and developed for a 20-year build-out with all the parcels around it. I know it's a little much, but there's
So my question basically was, there's a study that was done or is being done, so that as you move out 20 years, these surrounding roads, how the traffic is gonna flow.
Right.
That's my question.
Yeah, okay. And then we'll accommodate it.
That's my question.
Yeah, board members?
So I guess so for the developer, again, so back to the loan and their exposure, it relates to this neighborhood improvement district and their ability to assess the land they own if they don't sell it. Don't they have an incentive then to potentially sell it to less desirable uses, companies that may not bring in the types of jobs they're looking for?
First of all, remember that the interest is capitalized for the first 3 years.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
there's really no exposure on his part for that first
For the
3-year
part,
period.
but I'm talking
But
about
then
the
after that.
build-out then, yeah.
Plus, I think the township zoning is going to control the type of uses. And I think it's just a good business sense to figure out to get the highest and best use and also realize the time restraints that start coming along in year 4 and 5.
And if I may say in addition too, if the development that occurs doesn't meet the assessment level as projected, he still will be on the hook to then make the payments on the bonds that, where the levels don't come up to. So I mean, if it is sold at the quickest as opposed to the most, valued use of the land, if the tax dollars are not generated, there's still an obligation by the landowner to then make those payments
Beyond the assessment from the neighborhood improvement district?
within the 20-year period of time. Yes, as long as there is debt on the bonds.
Yeah, there's a little misnomer. The special assessment, not something that comes from the assessment office. It comes from the neighborhood improvement district plan. It sets up a formula how different uses will be charged if there's insufficient payments for the TIF.
So Palmer Township's the control to ensure that whatever development goes into that TIF district is something desirable to the broader community, including the school district?
Absolutely. That's the kicker. Palmer has the caveat, right now this is zoned your agricultural farmland. So Palmer has the caveat of the rezoning. And we're only gonna get what we want. That's why we're doing the rezoning, we're proposing the districts, we're telling them what we wanna see from the interchange back.
Yeah.
But then after they're done, whoever they sell it to has to come in for a full-blown land development plan where we get our second and third bite at the apple.
Yeah, I mean, the broad contribution of the taxes to this TIF come from Easton, not Palmer, and Palmer controls the development. It troubles me a little bit. How about the Home Depot TIF district? Is that, I mean, how did that play out? I mean, 'cause that's one of the other concerns I have with this TIF district is we're gonna build an interchange, and then we'll see what develops.
Can you define your question a little bit more when you say how did that play out? What is it?
Did we know
that
there
you're-
was gonna be a Home Depot there?
Yes.
There was an
Now-
identified
now
end
all I
user.
know is there's gonna be an interchange here.
And that's the need, that's the
That's what might open.
the reason for the neighborhood improvement
Yeah.
district and the incentive to see that the land is developed as projected.
Okay. So that's.
And if you
that's
look
a
at the
concern.
Palmer
I'm
Town
for
Center-
tax incentives, let me put that out there.
If
I'm
you look at the-
struggling with the concept and trying to wrap my arms around.
But if you visualize what the roads were like at 25th Street and William Penn Highway before the TIF and that overpass and then all the congestion and the two-level street with Wilson and Palmer and how all that has improved traffic, I think it even at one time, it benefited the school district to see those improvements come in. It got the buses and the traffic in better. So it really had a benefit beyond the TIF district.
Are there other TIF districts in Northampton County, or is the?
These are the Palmertown Center is the only one the Northampton County Industrial Development Authority administers. There is one in the city of Bethlehem that's administered by their redevelopment authority.
What was that? What's that one?
That's
Beth Works.
the Bethlehem Works project.
South
that's-
side.
Perfect site for something like this, in my mind. I mean, Home Depot, I think that was an excellent example of a TIF. Anyone else have other questions? I have a lot of questions, but.
Yeah, I have one. Today we received an email from Attorney Freund, and in that, there seems to be, or we're being told that there is a discussion and a possibility of making this an educational end of it. Is that in the proposal? Whereas, would you like me to read what John wrote, or would I'll have Donald read it? Did you?
It's all right. I think, I'm not sure what the email says, Mr. Myers, but
I'll have the attorney read what, because
Fair.
obviously he had expressed something with making this some sort of co-op.
well, I think that my comment earlier was that there had been a suggestion that the school district have an opportunity to work with Mr. Schrin in developing perhaps some employment opportunities, the school district, the Career Institute. And my response to that is that I think that it would receive very favorable attention by Mr. Schrin. I think there has been some discussion with him. I think he's favorably inclined. Obviously, if there has to be an exploratory group put together to perhaps explore some of those options, that's something that should be pursued. Don,
Just a-
are we covering there?
Did the board get a copy of?
We all got emails. Did you read emails today on this?
I think that's essentially what the email says, and my
Okay.
understanding is Mr. Freund met with counsel for the Schrin Group, and
Yeah.
that was discussed with
That's right.
Mr. Schrin's lawyer as well.
Yeah.
When we had met prior,
Yes.
it was Mrs. Allison, myself, and Mrs. Holzberger.
I recall.
One of the things that was brought up, obviously, was our students' needs. And we had asked if there would be a possibility of a partnership with this project with our students, whether it's with CIT, whether it's with our students that are currently enrolled in our programs, or if it is for employment. It depends, obviously, on what type of projects and people that you do bring in.
Sure.
And we're asking that if there could be some some type of a learning component that would help our students, and it was received well, so we thank you for that.
Questions, folks? Joe, do you have anything?
No, I was continuing on with his questions.
I mean, so that area, if I look at it, I mean, so Majestics there, we talked about Majestic already. Porsche is in that area. You know, I guess it's the southwest corner, I guess, of the property, has access to that same road that leads out to 248. So, you know, I was trying to do some research in the past 30 days I've been on the school board here. One of the articles that surfaced talked about the Porsche facility and that they looked at, screened 50-something sites and settled on this location without the interchange. I mean, so yeah, I'm trying to reconcile that with the magnitude of the TIF and what, and you know, the need, you know, as large as it is, the need to offer this for that location.
I could touch on the prospects, the volume of prospects that have looked at the Lehigh Valley to date. Since the first of the year. And the Shren organization and their staff can speak a little bit better potentially to this than I can, but we've had nobody else that's committed.
So there's nothing else under contract, no active negotiations under?
There are always companies that are looking at that area, and one of the things that I touched upon earlier is in Northampton County, we don't have the developed or the ready sites for office space, for instance, and we're losing office, companies that are looking for office space at Stabler Center or else, places outside of Northampton County. And so, once the interchange is approved, or the TIF is approved to build the interchange, we expect that that'll be a substantial carrot for those companies that are kind of, waiting to see what happens. I mean, Porsche was a number of years ago. I could probably get you a list from our prospect development arm as to all the other companies that have looked at it, but right now there is not anyone else under commitment.
And there's two other things. You heard the chairman say there's not going to be rezoning from agricultural to permit this unless there's infrastructure improvements.
Sure.
And given the volume of land we have, and we heard the comment from the one director about traffic, we've got to make traffic improvements. We've got to make access to Route 33, or we don't have the zoning. So it sort of all goes together.
The struggle is what ends up there, really what it is, what happens. I appreciate there's no exposure to the district. I'm just, the example, the existing TIF district in Northampton County. I mean, there's certainty there. You know what's going to be there. You know what you're signing up for. Here, I'm not sure what we're foregoing the ability to tax the property, I guess, in that area, not knowing what's going to end up there.
I mean, from the Palmer Township end, I think, I've only been there 15 years, but I think we're the leaders in the Lehigh Valley of how to do zoning and planning right. We've been doing it from the 50s and 60s, and you look at Palmer Township, the way it's been planned out from a traffic and infrastructure standpoint, you look at the way the township's been governed and how it's been handled financially for the last 50 or 60 years, we're sitting in a really good place. We're gonna do the best we can to make sure it's right. We control the development, and that's the caveat. It's not a developer coming in and saying we want to build
Right.
X, Y, and Z. It's we're telling them this is what we want to see.
But I think everyone gets a little more desperate when things drag out and you don't see what you did in a study. I mean, on paper, it looks good.
Sure.
But, the world's a changing place. There's competing areas. The Lehigh Valley, they're interested in building up their industrial parks too. The flow through of this incentive to anyone that's willing to move into that industrial park is controlled by the developer. So he's getting an incentive. He's getting essentially the increment above the base tax value to pay the loan. That's advantageous to him as a developer of that area. When a company is looking to move in, that if he was to pay for this development himself, he would have to factor that into his pricing of that land to any company looking to come in there. Sure he would, if he was
Yeah,
paying
no, I'm
for
just saying it would be, it would be very difficult to sell the property
If
as a
he was,
result.
if this wasn't gonna get done, so if he would have to do it on his own, he would need to factor that into his
Yeah.
pricing
Yeah.
to pull companies in.
Plus, he
So
would have
now
to,
he's getting an incentive,
yeah.
and he still needs to develop a price to compete, to price against competing industrial parks. Where I'm struggling is he manages, he the developer, they manage the flow of that incentive that he's gotten to through pricing to potential prospects. I don't know if I said that clearly or not, but.
Well,
And so as time, so he's gonna price just below the competition to get in there until he gets a little more anxious because it's not playing out as the Dietrich study has thought. And so he's gotta lower, then he can manage how much he wants to lower his price to pull prospects in. And so I'm wrestling with that. It just feels like it's more of an incentive to the developer than anyone else. It's more guaranteed benefit to the developer than necessarily the community. I mean, Palmer has somewhat of control over that. So, we're putting our trust in you.
Other than the
For
cost of
business.
selling the land, we have all the control over it. Other than the physical cost of selling the land, our planning department, our zoning department, and our board of supervisors will control what goes in there and how it's done, period.
How about the residential aspect of this? I mean, is that strictly a verbal commitment, or is that in writing, or how's that?
Well, the tax segment plan says no residential.
Okay.
The Dietrich report
So it is in
says no
writing.
residential.
That's-
Yeah.
So is there any negative potential financial impact to the district over the lifetime of this plan?
Now, you continue to get the 116,000 priority funds. And I'm saying if there is no interchange, there is no TIF, there's no change in zoning, then you'll get the $168 an acre ad infinitum, just stays that way. Because the township is controlling the zoning, and as Dave said in their 2003 comprehensive plan, they said, we will only rezone that from agriculture if there is the interchange and infrastructure improvements. But you're talking a humongous amount, and not only would the developer have to do it, he'd have to front-end it and pay the interest on the loan before he could be selling it off. So that's a huge exposure.
I know you can't believe everything you read in the press necessarily, but there were articles about this, that the developer was in fact going to do that, was going to develop that interchange.
Right.
How, does that, can you?
But you know, one of the things as you get into the planning, and we show in the TIF plan, that 31% of the $23 million for the interchange is replace the deteriorated bridge at Main Street. That's 31%, that's a cost. Then we have the transitional improvements that have to be made to make sure all the surrounding communities are satisfied with traffic movement.
They would have had it made anyway without the bridge replacement, but wasn't that been factored into the original?
I'm not too sure about that because we would not be involving PennDOT if there were no interchange. That's a question for Anne Ray, right?
There's no development.
There's no development, so
Now, if there was going to be development without the bridge, you mentioned the bridge and how much
They
that
wouldn't
is.
be able to develop. I mean, you have to prove that your roadway network can accommodate for development, and without a bridge that is efficient.
Assuming the bridge was sufficient,
But it's not.
Even so,
but it's not.
any
well, I'm
type
gonna
of
still
development.
pretend for this community. I mean, wouldn't they have had to develop, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just trying to make sure I understand this. But, there's surrounding roads, it sounds like, I think you said, that needed to be improved in addition. They would have had to have been improved anyway without the fact that you had to.
Right, and that's another 2.6 million that's above and beyond the 23 million that we have for the interchange that is not part of the TIF, has to be paid by private funds.
Okay.
That just keeps adding the burden up.
That would be completely limited. Your development would be very limited to what your existing roadway network can hold, pulling the north and south interchange. If there's no interchange, you can only accommodate so much in
Right.
a roadway.
Well, we were gonna do the,
Even
but
if
the
you expand
interchange,
it,
the
you can only
interchange was,
expand it so much.
the interchange was going to be completed, that was my point. The interchange was going to be completed completed, no bridge, you didn't think there was a bridge issue. I would have thought, I would have hoped that that improvements would have been made to Van Buren Road, Academy Road. I mean, they wouldn't be able to handle the traffic through there. So I would have thought that was part of the base plan until we learned about the bridge. And then the bridge gets pulled into this, and now the whole project's in a tip.
Not Van Buren Road, not once you get out, and not once you get out of that initial interchange area. All of the roads you're talking about, these ancillary roads and back up down in there are not.
You wouldn't have had to touch that.
You would have had to do them, but at the developer's expense. They're not, none of that money is wrapped into.
No, I know that's not the tip. I thought that you mentioned that as a cost to the overall project for the developer.
It's an additional cost to the developer, yes.
Right,
The land, I mean,
right, that wasn't a change.
the land, the engineering, the approvals, the backup, the county stuff, the attorneys, all those road network and all that infrastructure outside of that interchange is all on a developer, totally separate of this.
Yeah,
thing.
and I appreciate that.
Totally
They would still have to meet with PennDOT and go through the entire land development process as well as, PennDOT process.
What I'm trying to understand, I guess, is the growth of the total project cost from initial estimates to now I gotta do a bridge. And now the cost has grown to some higher level.
The bridge was assessed, you know, we've done study of a structural engineering firm that does this, you know, this is the thing they do. They look at, if the bridge can be saved, if it can be halved.
Sure, okay.
I mean, this one is just so bad, it's been hit multiple times, it just, the vertical clearance alone is a huge issue. It's only like a 13-foot clearance where the state minimum is like 16.5. They can't even overlay under 33 in
Right.
that bridge area because of the bridge. So, you know, we did look into trying to save the bridge, I mean, obviously that's the first thing PennDOT wants to do, that's the first thing anybody wants to do. But it just wasn't in the cards for that particular structure.
And the TIF is, comes under an urban redevelopment law, which is to address urban blight, which is the term, and there's several, criteria, I guess, that you could, meet to achieve to meet the definition. And I saw a letter that talked about, in the packet, in the notebook that you provided, that talked about this land meets one or more of the criteria. Can you explain which one or more?
Yeah, it met several of them. The Borough Planning Commission found that, for example, one of the criteria is inadequate faulty street system. And the comprehensive plan nailed that one. Uneconomical and socially undesirable land uses. And again, when you compare the master plan land use proposals with the zoning, that hammered home to the Planning Commission that that was another fallacy with the site. So they certified it. I think they had 3 criteria, and they did that last August, about a year ago.
Frank, you have more? I don't think so. Jody?
I'm just looking at, in the front here with the topography site characteristics area. And I just wanna make sure that I'm understanding this correctly, where it says these
Right-of-ways, easements, and floodplain areas have various depths and, in some cases, may reduce the development potential of some of the lots by diminishing their ultimate buildable areas.
Can you tell me what page it was?
Sure, page 11.
And your question was on section 9?
Yeah. It's the last sentence, and then it goes into the next paragraph that says, in this report, it is assumed that approximately 30% of the subject's available acreage plus or minus 620 acres will be needed to account for its floodplain areas and support all necessary on-off-site infrastructure. Only plus or minus 435 acres will therefore be deemed usable for future development.
What they did was made the assumption that not all of the acreage is gonna be developed, so they underestimated the amount of land for potential development, so it was a
They allow for
conservative.
wetlands, detention basins. In other words, some part of the land would not be developed because of the land itself would be not there. And then the zoning requirements. So that was a conservative, in my opinion, conservative projection of 435 acres out of over 600 acres.
They're not saying that all 689 acres can be developed, they're only saying 435 of that. Yep. Wetlands, waterway, railroad track, things of that nature.
So they really took about a third of the development and said that will not be developed.
We tried to take the most conservative estimates in everything associated with the TIF, whether it was the tax dollars generated, the 2% discount period, the amount of land that's developed. The more conservative we are and make the numbers still work, you know, the greater success of it when it.
Also, none of the three taxing bodies raising taxes for the next 20 years.
You know, we assume no tax increases
They
either.
assumed no tax increases for 20 years for any of the three of us. Let's all hope that happens. If it doesn't, the money comes in quicker, the bonds pay off quicker, the debt's retired quicker, and all three taxing bodies get their full vote money a lot quicker. Assuming no tax increase for the next 20 years for any of the three of us.
Anyone else, any other questions? No? Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Anything else?
Well, thank you for allowing us the opportunity to present. In the package, the one thing we didn't mention is the numerous letters of support that we've received from surrounding communities, from the Council of Governments, from state representatives and senators, local economic development organizations, yes. So you know, it is our hope that you will consider voting on this issue tonight. Representative Grusella, who is a former teacher here and who was in the state legislature for 12 years, had asked to join us to speak in support of it as well, so I hope you would afford him the opportunity now to do that.
Do I really have to? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is, for the record, Rich Grusella. I live in 6630 Fairview Avenue, Martins Creek, PA. As mentioned, I'm a proud retiree of the Easton Area School District. There are about, I think by my count, about 8 of my former students in this room, Mr. President being one, and 12 years in the state legislature. And part of my job in the state legislature was to serve on a bipartisan tax reform committee. Now, you have a long evening, so you don't want to hear my spiel on that because I'll take you into the next 3 months. But I can tell you that of all the property tax reform school financing issues, Dr. Zahorchak, who is now in Allentown, was the Secretary of Education, and I had many, many meetings about financing schools. But I can tell you that of all the proposals, and there were many of them that that committee looked at, one constant was always tax ratables without students. It's something that was always very near and dear to my heart. So I'm here tonight, number one, to ask you and encourage you to support the TIF. I think this is an excellent project. All my time in Harrisburg, I also worked with the Bangor School District, with the one we have in Portland. It's a little different. It's not the TIF, but it's got the same basic philosophy, and that is the tax ratables without students. And I will tell you that this is very unique. Supervisor Chairman Culver mentioned it, and the late Wayne Groove and I, Mrs. Whalen was my legislative assistant, and she can tell you Wayne handled a lot of the economic companies that we would try to bring into the area. And as Alicia Carner also mentioned, we lacked the infrastructure in many cases. Wayne always lamented that everything went to Lehigh County and nothing came to Northampton County, and there were reasons for that. And one of the reasons was, in many cases, we lacked the infrastructure, the water, the sewer, whatever. But none of those developments that I've ever seen in any of my experience, which I know I don't look that old, but spans maybe over 40 years, I've never seen where the developer is responsible. As Mr. Culver said, I think this is one of the most unique things I've ever seen, in that the liability for failure here falls on the developer. And let me also say this, because there are a lot of developers around, and in many instances, some get a bad name for whatever reasons. Be honest with yourself, look at the project, look at the merits of the project, and look beyond the developer. Don't be against this because of a person. Be against it because you philosophically don't believe in it, or you think it's going to fail. I would encourage you along those lines. I'm also here breaking a promise to my wife that I was retired, and that she knows that when I left the house, she knows that economic development was always something for me. It always meant something to me, and education in the Easton School District meant something to me. I spent 12 years on the Education Committee, and I've seen the best, or what's considered the best and foremost best schools in this Commonwealth, and I've seen some of the most challenged schools in this Commonwealth, from Erie to Pittsburgh to Philadelphia to you name it. I toured almost, I don't know how many of the 500 school districts, but I can tell you a lot. You have an excellent school district here. Easton is a great school district. I'm very proud to have been part of the Easton School District for 30 years, as many of you were here. That test score business is another whole thing I can talk 10 months for you about. And you're right about the transients. That's what's very, very unfair about it, Mr. President, but that's a whole different subject. Let me just talk about one last thing, and that's vision. You've got to have vision. You have to have the vision of this project. You know, some of you in this room, some of my former students may have been too young to remember this, but some of us in this room might remember when they wanted to close the Fork School. Now, you sit here in 2011 and think about that. They wanted to close and sell the Fork School. And Dr. Maloney and the board at that time had the vision to say, that might not be such a good idea with all that land around here. People might want to build. And you know what has caused the problem in Easton School District. The whole financing area and property tax reform committee, one of the things it's really a twofold problem. It's not only the property tax financing for school districts, it's also the funding formula. You're never going to solve the issue of property tax unless you solve the funding formula. But again, that's a different issue. I tell you to have vision. You have to have the vision for the future. Are times real good right now? Of course they're not. Those of you that were in my classroom know I've always been a positive thinker. I always told you guys, treat every day like it's a holiday and every meal like it's a banquet, and you'll do all right. And I try to live by that my whole life. But you have to have the vision for the future. The tax ratables without students for this project are enormous. They're enormous down the line. And again, I've never seen anything like this where the developer would bear all that liability. Have vision. Have the vision. Imagine if Dr. Maloney and that school board had sold Fork School. Imagine. But they had the vision. You have to have the vision. History is replete with economic cycles. There's up and downs. We're down right now. But things are going to get better. They're absolutely going to get better. There's no doubt in my mind they're going to get better. Okay? And they're going to get a lot better if you have positive thinking and you have the vision along these lines. In conclusion, I tell you, it's been mentioned, my successor, Representative Emmerich, has signed on. All the senator mentioned, Senator Bosco have also signed on. I add my 2 cents to this project. I think it's an excellent, excellent project, and I think it's great for the school district. Be positive, have vision. Heck, I was a Phillies fan in the 50s and the 60s, but I had the vision and the determination that our day would come, and I'll be darned, it's come. Okay, now we're on top of the world. So I wish you well, and I'm very proud of all of my ex-students, including those that are running and I think are going to be elected to this board. And keep up the good work. Don't let negative people get to you. Remember, I always told you that. Don't let the negative people get to you. The late Joe DeLaba once told me, and I'll leave you with this, you're always going to have negative people. Rich, he said, when we landed on the moon, it was one of the greatest things in this country. But there were some people who said we landed in the wrong spot.
Representative Priscilla, I'd like to thank you for coming out of your retirement.
Can I have a note from my wife, Mr. President?
Would you have thought 35 years ago that you'd be calling me Mr. President? No, you had to get me, took you 10 minutes to wake me up, no.
I wanted to thank Representative Brusella and everyone on behalf of what you've done. One of the things as a superintendent is looking at the needs of our students. And needs and financial needs go hand in hand. And I think we all know over the last 3 years, the financial has always come to the top. And at the top should be the student needs. And one of the areas that I spoke with Dave Culver when I first took on as superintendent and said, Dave, if there's anything that you can do to bring more commercial property into our area, please, we'll partner with you, we will help you. As Representative Brusella said, when you look at commercial intake without students, that in itself is important for us to have that vision and to move forward. We need a tax base. Our tax base cannot be solely on residential. It's unfair to them. And when you look at that property, it is prime property. And I know that there are many people in our area that are very conservative. I am one of them, and I'm very prudent. But we do need to have the vision. We do need to have the teamwork in order to be successful. So I urge everyone to consider this very carefully. Mr. Schrin has done many, many good things in our community. And one of the things that I, along with several of our board members, asked for was a partnership for our students. So if we can have a tax base, if that tax base and those people that are going to come into our area, if they can provide a good quality of life for all of our community, so you are very selective with who comes into this area. That's the number 2 key. And the third key is to partner with our district and our students so that they have educational merit and different things to look forward to while they're in our organization and also when they graduate. So I thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
I just want to say one other comment regarding the plan itself and how it's put forth. Our tax dollars, and I want to remind everyone to look at that plan, in that the tax dollars that we would be getting, we will be getting. This plan is being put out that the extra increase in taxes will go toward the TIF, which would pay for the overpass, which will then improve the development abilities of the developer. So I look at it almost like he's looking for us to be a partnership in the business. And we need to look at what our budget looks like, which is paying for our students that are the top priority on our list. And we know what our budget looks like for the next few years. It's not good. It's going to be very difficult to put it lightly. And consider all of that when you're looking at over the plan as you critique it.
Okay. Anybody else in the comments before we move on? Because it's definitely just a presentation. It's not on our agenda. Okay. So if we plan to move on with it, you need to decide what you're going to do. Board members. It's not on the agenda, all right?
It's not on the agenda to vote. That's what you're saying, right?
It is on? Yeah, it's on the agenda to vote. It's a
No, it's not.
presentation. No, it's not.
It's presentation, right?
Right, it's just a presentation. So if you plan on voting, you're gonna have to put it into a motion to do that. Otherwise, we will not vote on it until next month.
It causes big problems. I think maybe Shrin's, the consultants may want to talk about the whole timing, and Alicia on what that does from a timing schedule, because you folks don't meet for a whole nother month.
Well, folks, somebody's gotta do something with it. If you're gonna put it.
Well, if I put out the motion to vote, we'll see how many want to vote. So I'll motion for a vote. Is there a second?
Is there a second? All those in favor say aye. Aye. None opposed? All right, let's take a vote on the vote to put it on. Is that what we're doing?
Putting it on the agenda.
To put it on the agenda.
Vote to put a vote on the agenda.
That's what we're
Yes.
doing. Roll call. Joe? you good? And we already did it, so we already approved it, am I correct?
It's on the agenda
It's on
now.
the agenda now, okay. So it'll come under new business? We have to have an addendum for it. And where will it fall? Under new business? And with that, we'll have to have some discussion and public comment. All right, we'll fall under number 9. Okay. It would be G. So we move over to page 7, and that will now be G. Am I correct, Donald? Letter G. Under our, under new business. The vote on TIF. No, we'll follow in the new business. So it would be letter G. We all in agreement with that? All right, when we get to G, please remind me in case I get carried away with myself, all right? Okay, with that being said, now we will move to item 5, interested citizens on the agenda items only. Please step up to the podium, sign in, and you have 3 minutes, and I am cutting you off after 3 because it's getting late already. We have a lot to go through. Now, Tom.
2 minutes, 30 seconds. That's all I'll
Frank
need.
Pinnabone, that's a stretch.
2:30. Basically, I just want to speak today, just to give some clarification on the email I sent to the board. The people that emailed back, responded, thank you very much. Unfortunately, I didn't receive anything as I received a virus on my work computer from a client that night, so I lost everything. Speaking to Mr. Myers last night and Mr. Simonetta today, I learned that I might not have been as clear in my second option. The second option I had was basically to, when it comes to the engineering contracts, is to lock in a firm for 3 years based on, for emergencies only. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the time. You see what you did to me? Lock in firms in a 3-year contract for emergencies only. All capital improvement projects, small or large, I would like to see them to be bid out as they come up. I think the bidding process is very good. I think it will assure us best rates for quality work down the road. We are still in a financial mess. We will, as Mr. Grusella said, come out of it. Do we know when? We don't. To lock in for a 3-year contract for everything, I just think isn't the best idea right now. I would like to do a 3-year contract for emergencies only. You know, as if it is an emergency, God forbid, we don't have time to bid it out. But all capital improvement projects, small and large, I would like to bid them out as they come. So I would ask, maybe we can table it, send new RFPs out, and, you know, get bids for an emergency only contract, since that's not what we sent RFPs for. And then, you know, as the capital improvement projects come of any size, then we bid them as they come up. So I just wanted to give that clarification. I'm sorry if I wasn't more clear in the emails. Thank you. 2 minutes, Mr. Myers.
You're scaring me. Anyone else, please? Just so you understand, sir, we're going to allow you to speak because you're not, unless you own property in the city of Easton, you really don't.
Thank you.
We're going to allow you to curse, and you have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. I completely support the TIF. I thought it was a great presentation. I came here to learn. I learned something. I just wanted you to consider the chronology of events and the dates as reported by the newspapers, and Colin over there will verify that the newspapers are always accurate. First article I read some time ago was that Trin was asking permission on their dime to build the intersection on Route 33. We have to assume that their business plan took into a cost of the tax revenue that you were going to receive, et cetera, as part of his cost. Obviously, he wouldn't have put forward that proposal if it hadn't have been profit for him, if it hadn't have been money for him. The next article suggested that PennDOT added cost to it because of the bridge, $8 million or something like that, according to the article. Now, the next thing I read is a TIF proposal for the entire cost of the entire project. I think this is what you were trying to get at. I'm not sure I understand why the TIF has to pay for the whole project whenever the proposal originally was that he was going to be able to make money, he was going to put the intersection in on his dime. And now, he doesn't have to come to the table with any of the money, it's the TIF money that pays for it, which increases his profit. And you don't get to start collecting the additional monies for taxes until 80% of it, 20% you're only collecting for the first 20 years. The project probably will go without the TIF money if it was in the business plan. And if indeed the $8 million is going to drop the project, then I would strongly suggest that you only use the TIF plan for the $8 million additional that it's going to cost. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry, so you need to write your name and state where you work, 'cause we don't have.
I wrote it. My name, sure, my name is George Washburn. I live at 235 Spring Valley Road, and that's in Williams Township.
Thank you. Anyone else on the agenda item? Why not, Mr. Field? Wouldn't be a meeting if I didn't hear from you.
And I certainly would not want to disappoint you, Mr. Myers. Kurt Ely, I live at 305 West Monroe Street in College Hill. I had two separate areas of comment and only have 3 minutes. First of all, on the agenda is the opportunity to choose an engineering firm. And I would ask that, I've been told, it's hard for me to ascertain this because I'm not an engineer, but I've been told that the engineering contract as drafted, apparently by Dewey, varies from the original request, the original RFP. I've been told that that's significant, that it's important because had other contractors been aware of what was really coming down the road in terms of the final contract, that their bids would have looked very different. Now, again, I'm not an engineer, I don't know. But I would ask that you be very careful in making this decision. And I would also ask that perhaps the owner of Dewey could perhaps be the individual who answers questions in the future. I know that other districts have requested that they ask that of him rather than having representatives. They would like to have the owner there. I think that would be a very wise thing. I'm very much in favor of Mr. Pittibone's recommendation, but we'll see how that goes. Next item has to do with the TIF. I was completely kind of caught off guard. Incredibly creative, very creative. All of the risk, it sounds like, would ultimately fall onto those bondholders who are lending the money. I'm a little concerned about the TIF. Who owns the property? Who gets to vote on the NID? My understanding is a neighborhood improvement district requires a vote. Who will the property owners be? Right now, I believe the only property owner is, am I correct, and it's one individual? So one individual is going to make a vote on this? I just think this is very creative, but I think it deserves a lot of careful attention. And despite their needs, I think we need to be concerned about our needs. And perhaps you might want to take a look at this a little further before you vote tonight. Thank you.
Anyone else? Going once?
Noel Jones, 800 Ferry Street. I'm not well versed on the TIF issue at all, so I'm neither for it or against it at this point. But after listening to the presentation, I had some questions. I have a hard time understanding how agricultural land can be considered blighted, for one. I too was curious as to who owns it. I'm also curious as to what's growing there. If it's agricultural land, it sounds like it's being used to me, so I guess it concerns me that agricultural land is being talked about as if it's unused right now and needs to be. It sounds like it is developing something, that it's growing something, but I would like to know whether anything's planted there or whether it's just a field of weeds. And one thing that disturbed me is that a resolution got handed out to the board during the presentation rather than days or weeks before this presentation, and especially now that a vote has been put on the agenda. This is one of the things that citizens and voters in the community are really tired of seeing, is really pertinent information that needs to be studied by our elected board being handed out moments before votes are taken, and then our board being pressured to actually vote at that time. So that's one issue. The other issue is on the engineering contract. I wanted to thank the board for listening to the concerns of residents last time and voting to table the vote on approving the Dewey contract. And if you are going to vote on it tonight, I hope that you won't. I hope that you'll consider Mr. Pinnabone's idea and consider all of this really carefully. But if you do vote on it tonight, and if you do approve Dewey, I would really like to request that our new COO and our new board member, Castrovinci, explain so that citizens can feel at ease and at rest about the decision, to explain why and how they arrived at that decision and why they feel good about it, so that citizens can feel good about it too. Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, then we will move on to reports and information. Item 6. With that, superintendent's report.
At the beginning of our first meeting, we had a moment of silence. And it is with great sadness that the Easton Area School District and community lost another student, Louis Ogiova. Our thoughts and our prayers are with Louis's family and friends during this very, very difficult time. And I wanted to also thank Dr. Mara Roberts and our high school staff for bringing our crisis intervention team together for our students and our staff and our parents, or for anyone else that needs them. Obviously, this is very difficult for our entire community, and we are very saddened by this. In addition, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of our central office and building level administrators and staff members for their diligence and work ethic as we prepare for the opening of the 2011-12 school year. I am thankful and appreciative of all of the hard work that these individuals have done and continue to do on behalf of our students. Our induction program started this week with our staff. And thank you, Mr. Castrovinci did an outstanding job, and I thank all of our administrators and staff members for helping with that. In addition, our teaching staff and support personnel will begin on Monday, August 22nd. Professional development initiatives and opportunities for our staff members will take place the entire week, from August 22nd to August 26th. We're very excited about that. We have many great opportunities for our staff. We are eager and excited for our students' first day of school, which will begin on Monday, August 29th. And in closing, I would like to reiterate the pride and appreciation that I have for all staff members of the Easton Area School District, for it is truly a collaborative process to prepare for the opening of each school year. I respectfully thank everyone for their teamwork and contribution to the success of our students.
Chief Operating Officer in your first official capacity, Mr. Simonetta. Grace us with your voice.
Thank you. I just wanted to give a brief update to the board and the community on the summer projects. We are undertaking 3 projects, really just roofing projects at the high school, the middle school, and the education center. We did have a couple of hiccups at the high school, but I will tell you with the diligence of Mr. Case and the engineering firm, the project manager, we changed work groups, we changed supervisors from the construction company, and we're back on pace. We're not sure that it's going to be completely ready for the start of school, but any work that needs to be done after school starts will be done after hours at contractor's expense. The rest of my report is just to give, I don't know if it's been done before, and I apologize if it's redundant, but I want to take this opportunity to mention the custodial and maintenance staff around the district. And as you all know, I just started here and I tried to get around as much as I could. Seeing the buildings in the shape they're in early in August was really enlightening to me. I was surprised, very happy, but very surprised, and I will tell you, and I'll take a quote from Dr. Skidis. It's the good team, headed by, I don't want to put him on the spot, but Mr. Case over there, with his team, with the HVAC people, the electrical people, and we're doing air conditioning, we're doing electrical services, plumbing. I mean, everything is up to speed for the buildings, and it really makes me very proud to say, in a quick period of time, that the buildings were ready to go for school.
The building will be up and ready at the high school for the opening of school. At this point, currently, they have that main entrance closed because of the roofing issue.
Mhm.
Are they going to be able to
Main
open
entrance
that?
will be absolutely be ready, yes, and cleaned up.
Any other questions on the mic? If not, okay. Solicitor, you have a report?
No report.
I appreciate that. Association reports. Jenna Broder, Madam President.
As any teacher would recognize that if you guys need to get up and stretch it out a little bit, I'm perfectly okay with it. I can work around it. I'm used to doing much while students are moving about. I'm extremely excited about the beginning of this school year, I think more so than I've been for any other year, and I'm not preparing for a classroom of students, which is a very big change for me.
Our loss.
You've been very flattering about me not being in the classroom, and it's something that, as a person, it'll be very different for me. I enjoy being in the classroom. I enjoy being around students, but I am very, very fortunate to have the opportunity to not only just see the students that I come in contact with in my classroom, is that now I have the flexibility to be able to see students across the district. Students that I saw as, 8 and 9-year-olds have now grown into these young men and women who are most of the time taller than I am. But it will be nice to be able to just kind of see them and how far they've grown and really experience this district from the primary stages in kindergarten to the high school level. Part of the things I want to focus on is I want to be able to get into the schools and really understand what it's like to be in a high school classroom. I probably won't be sitting in a math room, not my favorite subject, so I don't want to cause myself any more stress than necessary, but it would be really interesting for me to be able to experience it on a very different level. And getting to read with younger children is something that I volunteered myself for, and no one turns away a guest reader. So I'm very excited about that. We're really focused on communication, collaboration, and community this school year as an association. We'll be using our website for communication. I've been working very hard on some updates that I'm very excited about. It's my little pet, so it's very nice to see up in lights. One of the things that we have decided to implement is really sharing with the community the great things that our teachers as well as our administrators are doing within the schools. We've started a Teacher of the Month program. Each month, anyone can nominate a teacher for Teacher of the Month. Students can make nominations, community members can make nominations. The nomination form is right on our website. Those will get submitted to me. I will be the only one who knows the name of the nominee, because once I receive them, I will remove the name from the nomination form and share them with the executive officers. We will pick 3 candidates that will be voted on by Rep Council every month, and you will get to hear the results during the association report every month. We wanted to do the same for the administration as well. We understand that our principals work so hard, and sometimes the hours are endless, and we wanted to be able to kind of say thank you. So we'll be doing the same with our administrator of the month. Again, the nominations, I will be the only one that knows them. It's kind of like the Emmy Awards. And then, again, I will be reporting at it. There are little prizes that go along with these things. The Teacher of the Month will receive a gift card to use towards their classrooms. And the Administrator of the Month, while I'd like to say the prize is getting a visit from me, we will be providing breakfast for the office one morning. Just a kind of way to say thank you. We understand we're all working towards the betterment of our students, and part of teaching our kids better is treating each other with, the respect and dignity that we all earn amongst one another. So I'm very excited about that. Taking nominations, the nomination forms are on the website. It's been really nice to meet with you guys. I know I've met with Mr. Castrovinci, met with Mr. Furst, I've met with Dr. McGinley, and it's just nice to sit down and talk about education and where we're going and where we've been, and I'm very excited about it. We'd also like to do more things in the community. We did Free Mart in the spring, where we provided things to the community that the community can't or is having difficulty providing for themselves at this point. Teachers donated items such as paper towels, toilet paper, soap, deodorant, and we provided them to the community. We're looking to do more of these events in the future and get involved with the kids in a community level. One of the most exciting things is the furlough, the grievance that you'll be talking about later. It has been very nice to talk to teachers who were furloughed at the end of last school year that are now being reinstated. They are extremely excited to be back in the classroom teaching. That's really been the general theme of talking to these teachers. So we have some really great teachers who are getting back in the classroom with an amazing amount of excitement. So it's a great way to start a school year, and I look forward to enjoying my last weekend of just being a mom for the summer and seeing everyone next week. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think we have any other associations here. Do we? Also the bus drivers or principals? All right. I will go to E, executive session reports. Wednesday, last night, from 6:30 to 8:20, the following individuals were present. Mr. Castrovinci, Frank, Mr. John Castrovinci, Ms. Stephen Buxman, Ms. Fisher, Mrs. S., Ms. Fleming Elson, Mrs. Mandarino, Dr. McGinley, Dr. Roberts, Mr. Simonetti, Attorney Spry, and Attorney Mark Walton, including myself, yours truly. Now we're going to move on to unfinished business. And on unfinished business, engineering service that was tabled, 6-6, to vote on 6/23/11, plus for 4-3 contracts required 5 affirmative votes, which we did not get. So what we're at this point right now is I need a motion. Is there a second? Second. Is there any discussion? If there is some discussion before we do that, I do believe that our COO has a short presentation that he would like to give to the board.
One of the first tasks that was provided to me when we get here was to review the RFPs, look at the numbers, and look at the service, and try to give a new opinion or an outside, so to speak, opinion on the RFPs and a recommendation. One of the things I was asked was about providing all the numbers to the board. So what I did, there's another page there because there were 13 proposals submitted. I don't know, can we put that up on one? I don't know if it would be too small or not. The one page?
I can try.
I'll go through it if you go back up 2 pages. Thank you. from a financial aspect, in reviewing the RFPs, most of them had a very significant upfront cost, whereas Dewey did not. They're familiar with the facilities. That time to get familiar is not required. The hourly rates, if you combine that with the hourly rates, for the most part, and most of my conversation is going to be restricted to the 3 firms that the board interviewed. That was the main focus, where Dewey was the lower hourly rates for the individuals listed here. Some of the areas, and I'm not saying every one, but some of the areas where they weren't, if you look at the upfront fees and the retainers were larger. So financially, I still believe that Dewey was the best choice financially. One clarification on the next page down, on the fees for the summer project. The percentage that's there, that was submitted, they were the 3 finalists, if you will, the firms that the board interviewed. On Dewey's proposal, it includes the architectural and planning aspect of those projects. On the other proposals, it does not. So you see that difference, like for example, Mazer to Dewey, you see 7.5 to 3.25. At this point, depending on the project, we have no idea what that difference would be for an extra cost for the architects for those summer projects. On the overall major capital projects, Dewey's fee is 3.5%, and Mazer's is the 3.25 there. So very close, very similar. In coming to my decision and my recommendation to continue with Dewey, I just have a couple bullet points to mention. And again, my initial experience here started August 1st. Since then, we've had the roof projects. We have projects going on. We've had problems. We had a problem with the contractors, with the workforce there. I will tell you, the response from Dewey enabled us to be in the position we're in, because they changed the group, and they changed the supervisor. They're there twice a day. So on my brief experience, the responsiveness, which is something that is very valuable, and you can't put a price on, getting this done is impeccable. I can't argue with that at all. But we talk about the experience in the district since 2002, proven experience, the projects, the major projects, the high school classrooms, the middle school expansion, March and Shawnee schools, all completed on time, all under budget. Their rates since 2002, 2003 have not increased with the exception of the project manager. And that increase in 2006 have not changed since. The history of cost-effective and efficient recommendations. They were very beneficial to us with the plan con and the reimbursement from the state on these projects. And again, I can't stress enough the comfort level of coming in here and having a firm that's familiar with the facilities and not kind of having to reinvent the wheel, if you will, when we're looking at the same financial hit, when the financials are so close. So with that, I will open up to the questions from the board
Board, have any questions for Mr. Simonetti?
The Barry Islet column, you're not including in there if there was a clause that they had presented at their interviewing time, and I think it's written in there, that if we would forego the insurance, the $3 million, then there would be a savings on.
I did see that in their proposal, but I mean, we didn't put that option out to the others, and I didn't really know to do that. Put the option out to the other vendors if they would reduce their fees or retainers as well. So I did not include that or talk about that with the board.
Any other questions from anybody? Statements? One thing I need to be crystal clear about this process, because at the last meeting, there was some accusations that it was unfair or whatever. Let's make sure we're crystal clear in the way this process went down. There were 3 finalists, and they were interviewed by 4 board members. We are not engineers. We are just lay people who could only take what they gave us, and we ran with it. So I just want to make sure everybody understands, in the public here, that this was not a process where it was anything but we've always done is 4 board members got together and we came up with consensus, and that's why we brought forth what we did. With that said, if there's not other questions, I'm going to move on to motion and call for a vote. Okay?
I'll just comment. I received after the last board meeting, I guess it's 12 or 13 proposals showed up, all about inch and a half thick, so a lot of information to sort through. But yeah, I mean, engineering contracts are complex. Scope of the contract is always an issue. There's a lot of gray areas, so you do have to stay on top of them. You know, when you look at the cost here, I mean, Dewey is extremely competitive. You know, so there was an open bid process here, I think, that that validated that their cost is something I think that we can deal with. The contract's a 3-year term. I'm comfortable with that. I'd be a little more uncomfortable committing to something that's 10 years. All right, so both parties have an opportunity to get out of this after 3 years. So you know, when you're paying an upfront retainer, you know, you may or may not use it. It depends on what's happening, you know, with the buildings and the facilities and so on. So you know, I mean, it's you know, you got to make a decision, and you know, my view, I think this is the right decision at this time to go with this type of approach, and I think we reevaluate after 3 years is my view.
Okay.
I think also that if we're looking at the retainer fee and the definition of what the retainer fee would be, what it would include, that it would be helpful for us, because I know there's a lot of gray areas within that. I mean, if you read it carefully, it can quickly flow into per hour cost, and the line that we draw there is sometimes questionable. So I would be very interested in seeing if Dewey is the engineering firm that we end up going with, a year or a 6-month, you know, fee structure of what you've paid at 6 months, in addition to the retainer fee, so that we could see where we're going with our costs engineering wise.
Any other comments?
The only other comment I would make is that I would also like to see representation from Dewey, in addition to Henry, to see our chief here, Arif here, at points of our board meetings for references.
That's something you would work that out with them. If we have anything else, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes. Organizational chart. Motion. Second. Discussion. If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? New business. Grievance settlement. Motion. Second.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? C, approval of personnel matters. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're going to move to C, employment termination. Motion to approve resolution to terminate. Is there a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're going to 9, new business, field trips. Motion as presented.
Motion.
Second.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we're gonna go contract of Eastern Area High School prom venue. Motion. Second. Gentlemen, am I going too fast? Oh, that's even better. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, database assessment coordinator contract renewal, Dr. Roberts. Is there a motion? Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Title I IU contract for non-public service. Motion. Second.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Kids fees contract. Motion. Second. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, foreign exchange students. Motion. Second.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're going to G now. That would be a vote on the tip. Are we all clear with that? Is there a motion? Is there a second? Any discussion? I think we discussed it enough. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
No.
So be it, tip is accepted. H, here is an addendum. And this is what we were discussed with last night in executive session. There are two agreements which we are legally bound to take care of. Can I have a motion on those? Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, now we're on to miscellaneous. This is important. A, appointment of district treasurer. That is to appoint Mr. Simonetti as our new district treasurer. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We're going to 11. Okay, but whatever it is, Havac Courts. Because I ain't even trying to pronounce that. Second.
Second.
Discussion. Tim, how many did we send them? One? Two guys? We did this last year, did we not?
What's that?
We sent people last year? One?
There's different courses each year.
Okay.
My question was, why is it necessary to send two in this economic climate?
Right.
Why cannot one person go and bring back the knowledge and train the other people?
That's
I
why
will,
we have discussion.
I will refer to Mr. Case, but I believe, is there certification involved in this course?
Actually, out of those two gentlemen, the two gentlemen that are going, David McCray is our HVAC person that we use, that's his title, but we use Danny Flamish. He's one of our plumbers, but he also is involved regularly with our HVAC activities. And the reason that we send two is because there is times when David is on vacation or he would be away for an illness or anything like that. We have somebody else training. The key component to this is the fact that we have a very limited contract with Johnson Controls and Siemens Controls that are building at this present time, that we felt it was very important to have two people educated to their highest ability in the controls for these systems at these buildings. We're actually going to save money because when it comes time to sign on with some contracts with these people, like at the two new schools where we have Siemens Controls, there was a 1 year after the school was built where we had a service contract that's expired. We have nothing there now but our people in-house. At the high school and at the campus, we have Johnson Controls. We have nothing there right now. We have no contract. The only contract we have right now is with Train, and that is for 8 hours per month of, I would say, educational help if we're stuck, when these guys can't solve a problem. So it's important to have two people go, for the mere fact that if one person is out, we have another gentleman there that's instructed on what to do if we have problems. And it sounds like, one can come back and teach the other, but it's really nice to have two people there that can hear it right from their mouth.
Isn't it possible to have the second person train next year if it's warranted?
Well, I think I'm not 100% sure, but I think the training will change from year to year. gets updated, next year's course will be different from what was, brought up at this year.
Even better. And you'll generate the same savings if only one goes.
We can certainly, any problems with that, if that's what you'd like to do, that's fine. I would recommend that if we change it just to one person going, that David McCray, our HVAC person would be the person to go.
Board members, any other questions for that? Otherwise, how do we feel about that? We have our new board member suggestion, we only said one, so two. How do we feel about this?
I think that we're looking at our budget across the board, and we need to start at day one. Last year, we were running into problems, and we're like, where can we cut, where can we save? And this is a perfect example, not that it's a huge amount, but everybody has got to feel the pinch somehow. And if we can educate and maybe bring education back to save the district money, that's probably the best way to go.
Anybody else? With one person?
That's what you said.
We all right with one? Okay. Is this feeling of the board, we want to go with one person? Sure. Sure. Mike?
Well, I will defer to Mr. Case. I mean, obviously, I'd like to get both for the reasons he stated. You know, it can be done, and we're certainly cognizant of the issue with the money and the savings. So, I know, Tim, and it looks like, you know, we're okay with that. I'm okay with that. And let's see what happens next year. Let's see what happens this year with the training with this one gentleman.
Can I ask this question, Tim? Do you by chance know if there's a possibility that we would decide that the second person would need to go? Is there other training available at a different time and
Okay.
location?
We sort of picked the medicines training here because we actually have some of those systems on a very limited scale at Cheston and two of our other elementary schools. That's why we picked the medicine. This is probably the most advanced training that they would get. This is probably going to be the only training that David goes to this year because of our budgetary amount. So I think I would be fine with sending David, and he can relay that information to Dan when he comes back. They do work hand in hand a lot. Because let's face it, the size of our district, to have one person taking care of all the HVAC problems that we have is almost an impossible task. It's always nice to have that second person there when we need him. Of course, it's also helpful to me that when he's not needed to help David, we use him as one of our plumbers also.
Okay.
So we'll go with the one, and then we'll look at it next year. And next year, of course, is something that we want to send Dan to, or maybe again just send David to and have him relay information to Dan. I think that's very acceptable.
Okay, so we'll change this motion to say just David McCray. Is everybody in agreement with that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Unopposed? So we will send David McCray. Thank you, Robert. Okay, we're going to B, SSM Group Incorporated Indoor Environmental Quality Evaluation. I think this is something that we had to do because we had a problem. Otherwise, it could end up being a
We actually-
workman's comp thing.
Well, it is. It's actually a claim right now because of some odor in the office area down in the 5-6 building. And I will tell you, I'm very familiar with that because I had that at a previous district. So we did call in the company to do a test. And we're still waiting for the final results.
All right. So with that said, is there a motion? Second? Any discussion, anybody questioning those? We just did this a couple months ago.
We did.
The problem we had here earlier. All right, with that all said, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, we're gonna go to Buildings and Grounds Finance Matters. Motion. Second. Questions or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, we're gonna move on to new business, finance matters. A, there is a discounted rate for transportation, a Place for Us summer program.